Hey and welcome back. For this video we're only going just there behind me. I'm going to show you the basics of astrophotography and how I take pictures of deep sky objects. I'm not going to give a full and in-depth tutorial about each part of it, but it will give you a feel for how I go about taking these sort of pictures. So this is the final image of IC443 or the Jellyfish Nebula, and we'll walk through how it's taken. Okay, so today's journey, it's not very far. That's it, complete. This is the observatory I built in my back garden a few years ago. And in here we have a rather messy telescope setup. So, quick run through. This is the mount, that's the important bit. It makes the telescope move and track the stars. This is the scope itself. It's an Orion ED80. This is a Bartonov mask. Well, this is the mask. This is a motor I designed to move it using this power supply and an Arduino and a few bits and bobs of electronics. Up on the top there's a load of power supplies which are a bit crude and messy. Dangling off it is a Raspberry Pi which powers everything, and a USB port hub which pulls in the main imaging camera, a filter wheel, the guide camera which comes off, if I come around this side, this has got a prism in it and it's an off-axis guider. Field flattener, it's not powered. Autofocus it is, that moves this motor which moves the focus in and out. You can also use these wheels if you aren't using the electronic focuser. The observatory itself, wooden construction. I got a few batteries to overdrive a winch which can run off this to open and close the roof. A few pictures in here that I've taken. One that's fallen off of the great Nebula M42. Let's pop that back up. And a few other bits and bobs. So later on this evening we'll show this all in action and working. But that is the telescope. You can see the roof rolls off. You just move it by hand. There's a limit switch to figure out when it's reached the end of its travel, and we'll take some pictures of the stars this evening. So what I do is I choose a target, IC443, and I set up a sequence of images to be taken. In this case I've taken 5-minute exposures using my sulfur 2 filter, and it's going to do pictures for 8 hours. So I've set this all up, and it will also run a script to shut down the Raspberry Pi at the end of it, and then I'll set up a separate routine for my my Home Assistant to shut down the whole rig outside. The filter I'm using is sulfur 2, so there are 3 different filters that are used for red, green and blue that form the image, and they're hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3 and sulfur 2. I'm doing the 3rd and final filter this evening. You can see up here that the cooler is on. I'm actually chilling the imaging camera to -20 degrees. That gets rid of a lot of noise in the image. So when you're taking long exposure pictures, you don't get all the grainy background with the super cooled cameras. So this is busy working through the 100 exposures. It's just done the 2nd one, and I can actually show you what that looks like just behind here. So this is what the telescope's currently picking up. So you can see an eye shape here pointing downwards of the jellyfish. So that's going to be a really good image actually by the time this is done. So once I set that job up and set it going, the telescope unlocked itself and slewed across the sky to point roughly at this target. And then we move into something called plate solving, which is where, as you can see here, a picture of the sky is taken, and it will move the telescope to bring it in specifically on this target. You can see the star here, Geminorum, is actually this star here. So it uses the position of the stars to orient the telescope correctly. That process used to take me many hours stood in a cold field, and now it takes a few tens of seconds sat in my nice warm living room with an Ethernet cable to the observatory outside. So once we've plate solved and moved to point specifically at the target we're after, the guide process commences. So the first thing the guiding does is calibrates itself in 2 axes right ascension and declination. They're orthogonal to each other, they're at right angles, and that lets it know which way to pulse the mount to keep a star central. Up here you can see a few stars are regularly every 1.5 seconds being updated, 1.2 seconds being updated. And this camera is just constantly looking at those stars to see if they move. If they do move, it then corrects the mount to keep them in the same place, and the imaging camera can just sit there and take its images. So this allows me to take long exposure, 5-minute images in one go without any drift. If you didn't have a mount, the stars within a few seconds would be completely out of frame because they do move that quickly. Over the course of about 8 hours, they'll go from one side of the sky to the other from where I'm based. So the target last night was IC443, and I was doing sulfur 2, which is here, and we have lots of data that we got. So 55 5-minute files. It should have been more than that. So something's gone wrong. So I'll start by downloading all that data, and then I will have a look at what went wrong last night. So I'm using FTP, file transfer protocol, to download all of the images from last night. There's a lot of data to send back and forth, and FTP is sort of one of the quickest ways of doing that. And once I've downloaded all the files, I'll just delete them off the device outside and then deal with them on my computer inside. So I managed to record 49 5-minute images last night, which is about 4 hours worth, and then it lost sight of a guide star. What would have probably happened is either clouds came in or it reached a point where it was hitting the side of the observatory. This is enough data for us to get our sulfur 2. So we'll take our 49 images and we have to combine them together into a single image. We do that through a process called stacking. So I'm going to open a tool called Deep Sky Stacker to do this. So this is DSS, Deep Sky Stacker, and we'll start by loading all the picture files that we took last night, like so. And then we have to put a dark file in to get rid of a lot of noise that you get over long exposures, and some bias files, which is electrical noise that you get in the camera system's drivetrain. You can put flat files in, where you take a picture of a white object and that gets rid of some vignetting. I'm not going to do that on this one, it's not really needed. So once we've selected all our pictures, we stack those together. It's going to be a single frame with 4 hours and 5 minutes worth of data. I'm skipping over a lot of the detail here, because unless you're into astrophotography, it will be quite boring to watch. The stacking process won't take very long on this computer. It's a very fast computer, I built it last year. The output of the stack is a TIFF file, which is uncompressed. So we're going to go and modify that file. And once that's finished stacking, we'll convert that into a 16-bit version of a TIFF file, still uncompressed. And the ultimate image will end up as a JPEG. Okay, so all the files are stacked together now. The final picture is being produced, which won't take long, and that's it. So there it is, impressive, eh? So now we'll convert that to 16-bit colour so we can start manipulating it, and that's done. And this is where we move into the editing process of astro pictures, which is somewhat involved. So we're going to start with levels and curves, and we're going to pull up the lower end of the curve and down the top end. Now what that's doing is it's pulling out the background detail and trying not to blow out the highlights of the stars. So you will see gradually as I do this, the image will start to appear in the left-hand pane. As we start to see the image appear, we're going to move into levels as well, and we're just looking to keep this gap here between the start of the histogram quite low. It pulls down the blackness of the image, and then we're going to alternate between that and curves until we get where we want to be. Okay, so I'm going to save that as the sulfur 2 image to complement the hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 that I've already done. Then we will open those 3 images and combine those together to make a picture. Generally speaking, hydrogen alpha is going to be the best that you get. In our case, oxygen 3 has got a little bit of detail, and sulfur 2 has actually got an awful lot here. I'm going to spin that one round 180 degrees and put it in the same orientation as the others. I'm going to create an SHO image for red, green and blue. So I'm mapping sulfur 2 to red hydrogen alpha to green, and oxygen 3 to blue. So I'm going to start with my red because sulfur 2 is so good in this image. I'm going to grab the whole thing, copy it, and create a new image but in RGB colour. Then in channels, I'm going to paste it to the red layer. So I have just red in this image now, which will look ever so weird if you look at all of it, and nothing in green and blue. So my sulfur 2 is in the red channel. So my green channel is going to be made of the hydrogen alpha. So I'm going to grab that, copy it, and then paste into the green layer of this image. And finally, my oxygen 3, I'm going to grab, copy, and paste into my blue layer. So we've got 3 different images now combined into a single picture, which is this here. So if I switch all the layers on, it'll look a bit weird. You can see the alignment of the different colours is wrong, especially if we zoom in. So you see the green is rotated clockwise to the red and so on. So the first thing we're going to do is get red, green and blue aligned. To do that, we'll switch on 2 layers. We've got red and green for the sake of argument, and we're going to try and move those until they overlap. That will require some rotation, so I'll use free transform, which is Control T, and that will let me rotate the image. I'll just align red to green and then blue to green and then switch them all back on. So I'll do that now. Okay, so we've managed to align the images now. I'm going to keep that image as the baseline, so I don't want to ever modify that one. I'm just going to crop it and then start moving into our processing. So the crop is to get rid of the overlap where the various orientations of the images were slightly incorrect. So I'm going to save that in the same folder as the SHO, but as my working edited image. And then we're going to move into layers and processing. The first thing I'm going to do is duplicate the image. That means any changes I can make, I can very quickly undo. And I'm going to start by stretching it a little bit further now we've got all the colours in, and see what it looks like. Okay, that's okay. We'll keep pushing that a little bit further. And then we'll take the black point, the background down a little bit as well. Okay, that'll do as a levels and curves. So I'm going to start naming these so I know what I've done, and then I'm going to duplicate it again, and this time I'm going to do selective colour. So if you go to image adjustments and then down to selective colour, that lets you tweak the way the colours are presented. This one is very dynamic, and it's a case of going through each of the colours and deciding whether you want to boost or trim them. So I'm going to do that. I will expedite the video for this bit, and you'll see it starting to emerge as a picture. Okay, so that's the first pass of selective colour. You see the before and the after. It makes a very big difference to the image. So I'm just going to duplicate it again. I'm going to do levels and curves. And I'll see if I can push that any further. A bit more detail coming out now. Let me just trim that back a little bit. And then I'm going to do another selective colour as well. Okay, so we're going to do another levels and curves image, but this time I'm going to be adjusting one colour at a time. So instead of RGB, I'm going to switch to red, then green, then blue. Start with the red layer. Just going to boost that. Green is generally the brightness of the image. There's not too much blue in this. And then we'll do the same for levels, which is sort of the focus on the background. Instead of red, green, blue, I'll change each individual channel. So we're going to pull some red out of the background. I don't like how much red there is here. And then green, and then blue. And then we'll zip back to red, because you change one and it changes each of them. One of the things you can do to reduce the star size is a minimum filter. So filter other and then minimum. and that can pull out the stars from the background a little bit lower. Now that one, it can be quite aggressive, so I often just add some of that in, not the whole thing, and then mix those two layers. Now you can see quite a lot of distortion down here at the bottom and a bit of speckling coming in. So I'm actually going to use Topaz to denoise this now. Topaz is another piece of software. So I'm going to save this as a JPEG, and then I'm going to just quickly run that through a denoise. Okay, so here we are looking at Topaz. The left hand side is the image before and the right hand is after. You do have to be careful with the parameters you use in this. For the astro stuff, severe noise does tend to be the right one. And then it's a balance between removing noise but not completely distorting the shape of things, and enhancing the sharpness to bring out these fine details. I will merge this with the original image, I won't replace it, so I'm approaching this with a view of making the target look as good as I can, and the background I'm not too worried about. So I've just added a second layer here with the Topaz sharpened image here over the top of the old image here. You can see the difference it makes to the target, but also to the stars. So I'm going to be careful about how I mask this one. I'm going to start by creating a layer mask, and then I'm going to get rid of the entire image from Topaz, and then I'm going to use a brush tool to brush in what I want, and then we'll just bring in some of that detail. Okay, the next step is going to be a slightly more aggressive change. I'm going to lose this star altogether that's blown out. So I'm just going to crop the image, and I'm going to crop it like this, and it's going to show the image floating upwards towards the top. There's still a bit of a leftover remnants of the star down at the bottom here, and I'm just going to blur those out with a blur tool. Now with the astro imaging, this is as much art as it is anything. If there's something you don't like about the image, you can tweak it and change it. I'm using the blur quite liberally because you get a lot of noise in the image, and it makes it a bit smoother and a bit more natural. Okay, quite happy with that. I feel like I've got a bit too much dark empty space at the bottom right, so I'm going to just change that crop slightly. There we go, and I'm going to have another tweak of the colours. The bit of the image that I want to be sharp is really the top up here where you've got the waves of the gases. The other bits I want to be quite smooth and feathered and natural looking. And I'm just going to take down a little bit of the brightness around where that star was using the burn tool. So I use quite a large brush. I'm going to increase the exposure to around 60 to 67% it is. Just take that, that's too much. So I'm going to drop that down to about 30%, 25. Just pull a bit of the darkness down there. There's a little bit of red in the background, so I'm just going to try and deal with that with the levels. And then it's gone a bit more blue, which I'm quite happy with actually. Now, with the astro pictures, I often come back to them and decide I don't like them or want to change them. So I'm going to save this one as is, as iteration number 3. And then I'll come back to it in a few minutes and see what I want to change. Some of these get up to over 100 iterations before I release them as pictures. But that's where we're at for now. Okay, so coming back to the image and looking at it again, it looks a bit too green, and I don't like how much noise there is up at this top section. I feel like I can make this brighter at the front end as well. So I'm going to start by dealing with the green. I'm just going to pull up the curves window and take a little bit of green out of the image. And that already, I think, makes the red pop more. Then I'm going to brighten the overall image to bring out the front end of this nebula. Okay, so I'm pulling the top of the curve up, which pulls up the brighter bits. And then I'm just going to use the blur tool once more just to deal with this at the top. That's better. Okay, that's better. So I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to save that, I'm going to walk away for a bit, and I'm going to come back again. Okay, looking at this one, still looks like quite a noisy image to me, so I think I'm going to run through Topaz again, and it's getting a bit whiter here than I'd like, so I'm going to try and pull out some yellow in it. I'll start with the yellow in Photoshop with selected colour. Okay, I think I prefer that, and then I'm going to move over and do another denoise. You can see I've put quite an aggressive denoise on now. The stars look very unnatural. If I turn that off, they go back to normal. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before and brush in parts of the layer. So as you can see, astro images are not quite as straightforward as taking standard photos. The use of filters and colour mapping and the artistic side of the editing process is much more involved. So now you've seen in detail how this image was created. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Tune in for more content of the same nature.